So, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Secretary of Health and Human Services. 2 weeks ago, he sat down with Jake Tapper on CNN, and he said Lyme disease came from gain-of-function research. RSV came from gain-of-function research. COVID-19 came from gain-of-function research. Almost certainly. His exact words. Then he went on Fox News the next morning and said it again. And he announced that the United States government is going to stop it. Worldwide. Look at this shit. The next day, factcheck.org ran a fact check of the interview. They called it falsehood-filled. Every network covered it. Every reporter had an opinion. The HHS Secretary had told the American people that 3 diseases that have killed millions of people were manufactured in American-funded labs. And then the fact-checkers said he was wrong. And then everyone moved on to the next thing. Here is what we know. Lyme disease was identified in 1975 in Lyme, Connecticut. Dr. Alan Steer noticed children with strange arthritis. The bacterium that causes it, Borrelia burgdorferi, was isolated in 1981 by Willy Burgdorfer. It came from ticks. It is still in ticks. 476,000 Americans get it every year. About 5 die. The disease was not engineered. RSV was isolated in 1956 in chimpanzees with runny noses. Children get it. 2.1 million outpatient visits a year in the United States. About 300 pediatric deaths. The virus was not engineered. COVID is the question. The first cases appeared in Wuhan, China, in late 2019. The FBI has called the lab leak hypothesis plausible. The Department of Energy has called the lab leak hypothesis plausible. Congressional investigators have raised the question. The WHO, the NIH, and most epidemiologists favor natural spillover. Some scientists point to the furin cleavage site in the SARS-CoV-2 genome and say that pattern is statistically unusual for a naturally occurring coronavirus. Other scientists say unusual patterns occur in nature all the time. The evidence goes both ways. We do not know. But if Robert Kennedy Jr. is right about even one of these, and we do not know, then this is a problem. Because the United States government has a record, and the record is not pretty, and the auditor wants you to hear it. Start with EcoHealth Alliance. Peter Daszak runs it. He has run it since 2017. The NIH gave EcoHealth a $3.7 million grant over 5 years. EcoHealth passed roughly $600,000 to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The grant was for coronavirus research. Gain-of-function research. Robert Kennedy Jr. specifically named Daszak in his interview. Daszak did not respond to our request for comment. Here is what makes it worse. Daszak organized the Lancet letter in 2020 that dismissed the lab leak hypothesis as a conspiracy theory. 27 scientists signed it. Daszak did not disclose that EcoHealth was funding coronavirus research at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. He had a financial conflict of interest and did not say so. The Lancet later added a competing interest note. We do not know what Daszak would have said if asked. We do know what he did. Here is what makes it worse than that. When President Trump terminated the EcoHealth grant in 2020, the Biden administration did not restore it. Multiple congressional committees investigated. The Senate Intelligence Committee released a report. The report said the grant did fund gain-of-function research. The report also said the lab leak hypothesis was plausible. The NIH kept some of the underlying research files classified. The State Department kept some of the diplomatic cables classified. The Chinese government has not opened the Wuhan Institute of Virology's laboratory notebooks to international investigators. We do not know what is in those notebooks. We do not know what is in those cables. We do not know what is in those files. But Robert Kennedy Jr. thinks he knows. And we have a record of not being told. Then there is Tuskegee, 1932 to 1972. 40 years. The United States Public Health Service ran a study on 600 black men in Macon County, Alabama. 399 had syphilis. 201 did not. They were told they were being treated for bad blood. They were not. Penicillin became the standard treatment for syphilis in 1947. The study did not offer it. The men were not told they had syphilis. The men were not offered a cure that existed. 128 men died from syphilis or related complications. 40 wives contracted it. 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. A public health service doctor named John Charles Cutler ran the study for decades. A young PHS employee named Peter Buxton blew the whistle. He told a reporter at the Associated Press in 1972. The story ran in July 1972. The study ended within months. 40 years. The government did that. Then there is 1977. A strain of H1N1 appeared in the Soviet Union in May. It spread globally. 500,000 people got it. The strain was genetically almost identical to a virus that had been frozen in a lab freezer since 1950. Some scientists believe it escaped a Soviet lab. Other scientists believe it leaked from a frozen natural reservoir in Siberia. The genetic evidence has been debated for 48 years. We do not know. Then there is Flint, Michigan. 2014. The state switched the water source from Detroit to the Flint River to save money. They did not add corrosion controls. Lead leached from the pipes into the drinking water. 100,000 residents were exposed. Children showed elevated blood lead levels. The state knew. They kept using the river for 18 months after a local doctor raised the alarm. Multiple state and local officials were eventually charged with manslaughter and misconduct in office. The EPA was warned by its own employees and did nothing for months. The story broke because of a local pediatrician named Mona Hanna-Attisha who tested children at Holy Medical Center and could not believe the results. And then there is MKUltra. 1953 to 1973. 20 years. The CIA ran a mind control research program on unwitting American citizens. They used LSD. They used electroshock. They used isolation. They used hypnosis. They paid Stanford University and McGill University to do it. They destroyed most of the records in 1973 when the program was exposed. Some of the records survived because they had been filed under the wrong name by accident. That is the record. The United States government funded and ran research that harmed its own citizens for 40 years. Twice. Funded and approved research that escaped a lab and killed people worldwide in 1977. Switched a water source without corrosion controls and poisoned 100,000 children in 2014. And signed a $3.7 million grant with a researcher who later had to add a disclosure note to his own published statement. None of these are the same thing. Tuskegee was deliberate. Flint was negligence. MKUltra was secret. The 1977 flu may have come from a lab or a frozen reservoir. EcoHealth may have funded ordinary virology that escaped a lab. Daszak may have signed that letter believing the lab leak theory was a conspiracy. We do not know, but the pattern is the same. The United States government funded, studied, regulated, approved, hid, failed. That is the record. Robert Kennedy Jr. thinks Lyme, RSV, and COVID are part of that record. He may be wrong about Lyme and RSV. The science on those is settled. He may be wrong about Daszak and the Lancet letter. Daszak's conflict of interest is documented. He may be right about COVID. The science on that is not settled. We do not know yet. But here's what we do know. The questions deserve answers. The American people deserve the data. Whatever the truth is, it is in the files. The NIH has the EcoHealth grant records. The State Department has the Wuhan diplomatic cables. The Senate Intelligence Committee has its own report. The HHS Inspector General has the audit of the Wuhan Institute of Virology grant. The question is not whether Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is right. The question is whether the United States government will release what is in those files. And so far the answer has been no. That is the pattern too. The otter is not going to pretend to know the answer. RFK Jr. might be wrong about all three. He might be right about one. He might be right about none. The science will tell us eventually. The files will tell us eventually. The congressional hearings will tell us eventually. But the record of this government hiding the answer, that part is not questioned. So we ask, loudly, publicly, repeatedly, where are the files? Where is the data? Where is the answer? We will be here until we get it. Subscribe for more.
If you are a researcher who...
Yesterday, August 18, 2026, David Morens, Fauci's senior advisor, pleaded guilty in federal court in Maryland to conspiracy to commit offenses and to defraud the United States. The indictment names Fauci, Daszak, Keusch, and others. The underlying offenses include destruction of records, concealment of records, and bribery. The conspiracy was to defraud the public about NIH-funded gain-of-function research and the origin of COVID. The records were being destroyed. Now we know one of the 9 things we said we didn't know. The pattern is the same. The otter wants answers. The government wants silence. We will be here